way, and we're just doing this in way of review, but he opens his gospel by saying the beginning of the good news about Jesus the Messiah, the Son of God. And then he tells us about John the Baptist and how Jesus goes to him and is baptized by him. And immediately Jesus goes out into the wilderness where he's there for 40 days battling temptation from Satan. He goes from there and chooses his first apostles, his first disciples. And from there he begins driving out evil spirits and healing people of their diseases, so that in verse 25, early on in the gospel, we're already hearing this. News about him spread quickly over the whole region of Galilee. But while Jesus worked many miracles, of pain. But as bad as all from anybody for years, condemned to a lonely, hopeless life. Jesus, lepers were just happens. There's a number of Old Testament stories that would lead a person to think that. You remember Miriam, who goes into the temple to offer. Hey, you've picked your poison, you got to live with it now, is the attitude of many people. Heal me, or would you heal me? That's not what he says. He doesn't ask Jesus to be healed. Instead, he announces to Jesus what he believes. And what he believes is, if Jesus chooses to, he can make me clean. He had no question as to whether Jesus could heal him. But all those years of being avoided, all those years of being shunned and ignored and ridiculed have left him feeling unworthy. So the question isn't, could Jesus heal me? The question is, would he heal me? If you doubt Bible's full of errors and all this kind of stuff, they're really speaking out of total ignorance. They're taking a grain of truth and they're blowing it into something that do not amount to anything. None of them affect anything about Jesus Christ or what He's done for us or our hope of salvation. Nothing like that. So recognize that for a falsehood and people who don't know what they're talking about. But we do have an inconsistency here. And it's this. In fact, they've even softened it a little bit. Actually, it says Jesus was angry. Sounds right. He was filled with, really. But I want you to just... Why would He have been indignant? Well, there's a similar story over in Mark chapter 9. This man brings his mute, epileptic son to Jesus. And he says to him, "If you can do anything, help us." And you know what Jesus said back to him? And we can't hear the tone of voice, but I picture him going, "If you can?" Do you sense a little bit of indignation there? It'd be like if you went to a doctor and said, "If you were willing to help me with my medical need," and a doctor's probably going to go, "That's what I'm about. That's what I do." But I also want you to consider another reason Jesus might be indignant. Colossians makes very clear in Colossians chapter 1 that Jesus is not just the Son of God and that He sat back and knew about creation. Jesus Himself created. Jesus created this world in which we live. And He created this world to be a wonderful place where you and I can live together and where we can live with God. And sin breaks in and throws everything into a mess. It corrupts His creation. And this causes Him great pain. And we see this in more than just this story. But I believe Jesus looked into the eyes of that man and saw the torment that had been brought to his body because of sin and its consequences. And I think Jesus is indignant. I can understand why He would be. I can understand how He comes to this both filled with compassion and also indignation. So it goes on to say, He reached out His hand and touched the man. "I'm willing," He said, "be clean." Immediately the leprosy left him and he was cleansed. I want you to look for this as we go through this study of the Gospel of Mark. Mark loves to bring out Jesus touching people. Hey, let's don't even let our minds go to where this might go in the climate of our country today. The touch that we're talking about here, let's just don't even... These are two very different things. All right? Touch is so important to us as human beings. It is powerful, especially to a person who has been treated for years like an untouchable. Jesus' touch reverses the no touching rule. And the toucher does not become unclean from the touchee. It's not the leper who is contagious here. Jesus is contagious. He reverses the whole thing. The leper doesn't transmit his uncleanness to Jesus. Jesus transmits His cleansing power. Jesus transmits... Today there are some in this room who are lonely, which breaks my heart. It breaks my heart that someone could come to a place like this and be lonely. You might even feel like an outsider here today. And it may be because you feel ashamed, or maybe you feel unworthy of the touch of Jesus. Maybe it's because of some sin or some mistake that you've made in your life. And so you aren't sure. You aren't sure that He's willing to do anything to make you clean. But listen, Jesus cleansed that leper while he was still full of leprosy. That man's condition didn't turn Jesus off. That man's condition didn't turn Jesus away. That man's condition is why Jesus turned to him. And so if you feel alone or isolated or hurt or unworthy, do what the leper did. Forget all the barriers that stand between you and Jesus and run to Him. And ask Him to touch you and to cleanse you and to empower you. Now, don't miss this. Jesus sent him away at once with a strong warning, "See that you don't tell this to anyone. But go, show yourself to the priest, and offer the sacrifice outside in lonely places." Yet the people still came to hear him from everywhere. This cleansed man violates Jesus' instruction to keep this to himself. Instead, he went out and he broadcast the news. And as a result, Jesus' interest in Jesus became so intense that he could no longer enter a town easily, we're told, openly. He had to stay outside the city. He had to stay outside the gate. In lonely, what I don't want you to miss, Jesus basically traded places with the leper. The leper had once had to live outside the gate. But because Jesus restores him, he now gets to re-enter the city in fellowship with the people, while Jesus is relegated to living outside the gate. Because his encounter with this leper suggests that God cannot participate in flesh and blood experiences and not be affected by it. From this story for us has to do with Jesus' willingness to touch, to heal us. And there's some of you today, that's the lesson you need. But there's another lesson in this story for the rest of us. Are you moved with compassion and indignation for the condition of people who live on the outside, on the margins? It's much easier for us to judge them, to lump them in one statement so that we don't have to minister to them. But that's not the way of Jesus. So you can put that picture up. There's this statue outside a Catholic church in San Diego. Back in the early 80s, some vandals came and broke the hands off of this statue. And those in charge decided, we're not going to repair this and put those hands back on. Rather, they decided to put a plaque at the bottom of the statue, and the plaque says this: "I have no hands but yours." You see, Jesus has called us to be the second incarnation. The first incarnation was when he came to earth in the flesh. Again, what we celebrate at this time of year. But the second incarnation is that Jesus wants to again live in the flesh through you and me. He wants us to be him to the world. He has never called us to a quarantine zone. Can you imagine a hospital that's one main goal is to say no germs allowed in here? What kind of hospital would that be? We're not called to avoid touching the untouchable. We're called to serve them. We're called to save them. We are called to touch their lives as the hands and feet of Jesus. I can't believe I'm not hearing amens echoing off the walls and ceiling of this building. To consider our lives a success if we avoid the suffering of others is to make a mockery of the cross. And Jesus invites us to be a part of the great reversal. As we are filled with Him, we become the touchers. We become the contaminators. We become, I used the wrong word there. Can I back up? Can you erase that? We become the contagious is what I meant to say. And you do realize that love and joy and faith are contagious. The secret to spiritual health is not to isolate ourselves from sin and suffering. No, the secret is to be so filled with Jesus that as we touch the world, we infect it with the love of Jesus. Someone has referred to this, I love this. I don't know who said it, but I love it. Someone has referred to all of this as the immaculate infection. And so, church, let us go out and let us be contagious and let us infect this world with the love of Jesus Christ. So this morning, maybe you've been hit by one or the other or both of the things that I've tried to bring out of this story. That hopefully you're convinced of how you need the touch of Jesus and how much He wants to give you His touch. But maybe you're convinced that you need to be the touch of Jesus, and both of those things are true for all of us. But if you've never received the touch of Jesus, hey, this morning we offer you the opportunity to come and be baptized into Christ. We offer you the opportunity to come and have us pray with you, or go to room 102 and let an elder and his wife pray with you about this. We're here to serve you in that way. We're getting ready to sing about, do you know my Jesus? We want to know Him. We want to know Him. Let's stand together as we share in this song.
Tending a load of care. Are you a soul that's seeking rest from the burden?